What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode. This is episode 2 of Sisters in Crime with Shy and Toy. This is Shy.
And I'm Toy.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So, last week we discussed Susan Smith, and I really had a lot of fun recording that last week. So, this
Yes.
is episode 2. Now, disclaimer for this one's a heavy one. Um, we cut up a little bit last week. Um, I also wanted to mention if you hear us laughing, we don't think the murder is funny. Me and my sister, we just kid a lot back and forth, say silly things. But we do
Right.
understand the seriousness of each case we discuss. And
Right.
this one, I want to give a disclaimer. This one is heavy. So
Yes.
if you are a person that is very sensitive to like abuse and SA, and maybe you might want to miss out on this one. I totally
Especially when
understand.
it comes to children.
Yes,
So just trigger warning.
yes, definitely. So this week we are going to discuss the case of Sherry Smith. Um, this took place in Lexington, South Carolina, in the Columbia area. And of course, like we do in every episode so far, we start off with the history of the person. So, sis, you want to start?
Yes. So the person in question is Larry Gene Bell. He is our murderer for this week. So Larry was born in Ralph, Alabama. He had three sisters and one brother, so he was one of five children. There wasn't a whole lot that I was able to find on his family, like his brothers, sisters, or his parents, other than they moved around a lot between Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina. I know the parents did end up divorcing, and like I said, they did move around between primarily those three states. So Larry went on to get trained up as an electrician. Eventually, he met his wife. Couldn't find a lot of information on the wife. I just know that they got married and they had one son. In 1970, Larry joined the Marines, but he wasn't there for long because later in that same year, he had a knee injury because he accidentally shot himself while he was cleaning his gun. So he left the Marines the same year that he joined. So that was very short lived. There was also mentioned that he used to work at the Department of Corrections in Columbia. That only lasted 1 month. It doesn't say why. I don't know if he was involuntarily fired or if he voluntarily left on his own will. Don't know what the case was, but he did work at the Department of Corrections for 1 month. And his wife, and son moved to Rock Hill, South Carolina in 1972, but him and his wife ended up getting divorced by 1976. So, um, like I say, that's going to be relevant here in a minute as to why he was between Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and also North Carolina. That'll become relevant as we go through the case of Sherry Smith. So, do we want to go ahead and start with May 31st, 1985, Shy?
Absolutely. So on May 31st, 1985, Sherry came home from being with her friends. I think I read she had been like hanging out somewhere, like swimming, because it was reported she had a bathing suit and different things left in her car. So she pulled up at her home to check the mail as she always did every day. They said she did this almost all the time. Um, Sherry was so beautiful. I saw pictures of her, so beautiful.
She was.
Definitely. And had so much to look forward to. She was almost ready to graduate. She was preparing for a class trip. And she had so much. I think her graduation was in 2 days
Yeah.
of her going
Yeah.
missing. So she had so much to look forward to. And her dad saw her out of his window
Hmm.
that day, as he always did, and he saw her checking the mail, and he noticed a substantial amount of time went by, so he looked back and he saw her car was there, but there was no Sherry. So immediately he panicked because that's just uncommon, and he
Mhm.
called his wife, her mom, and said, something's going on. Sherry's car is at the end of the driveway, but she's not there. So they ran down to the mailbox and they saw her purse was there, and also like some more items like maybe clothing or something. So they knew immediately something was wrong. Not many reports report this, but Sherry actually had diabetes insipidus, so
Yeah.
she always needed hydration in her medication. And so for the fact she left her medication in the car, they knew immediately something was wrong.
Yeah.
So immediately they called the cops and informed them what has happened. And the cops immediately developed a search party. And I think still to this day, that was the largest search party in the history of South Carolina.
Oh yeah. Missing 17-year-old, beautiful as she was, high school, she was very extroverted, given, very much popular girl. Like she was really beautiful, y'all. I don't know if y'all seen the pictures, but if you haven't, go look them up. Like, I mean, stunning. Like, had her whole future ahead of her.
Definitely. And it's so sad. I mean, the events that take place next is so sad and so scary. And I can't imagine what the family went through and how they felt. I pray I don't know ever,
Right.
because it is a heavy case. And for the next couple of days, of course, they searched for her. No, no results. Couldn't find her. So 2 days later, the family received a phone call from a man using a kind of like a piece of equipment that distorted his voice and informed them that he had their daughter.
Mhm.
And immediately, they were skeptical about it, but because there are a lot of people that call in when there's missing person or cold cases. People call in with tips all the time, and sometimes the tips lead to nowhere.
Right.
So they really were a little skeptical, but he was able to verify the bathing suit that she had on the day she went missing.
Yeah.
So that's how they knew she was on to something, that he was telling the truth.
Right.
So 2 days, like I said, 2 days later, a call came to the family. He said that a letter was going to arrive the next day, but I commend the police for this. They didn't wait until the letter came in the mail. They went straight to the post office and intercepted the letter.
Right.
Yeah.
The first
So
time they was on it immediately. They was like, "Nah, we not waiting on that."
right. Right, immediately, and which I commend them for, trying to work hard to find her. So, after that, they got the letter and they open it, and this is one of the parts that is really triggering. I know after doing all my research and stuff, I had to step away because this part really moved me.
Yeah.
So sad, but it was a letter from Sherry, and it was titled "Last Will and Testament."
Mhm.
And basically in the letter she told her family how much she loved them. She spoke a lot about God and how even though what was going to happen to her was very sad, that good will come out of it.
Yeah.
Now the most cryptic part and the most disturbing part is, and you can pull up the letter if you want to, it is online, you can pull up the letter that she wrote. She mentioned in the letter, like, just in the middle of a sentence, the sentence, like the two words didn't even make sense within the sentence, but in parentheses she wrote casket closed.
Yeah.
So of course it's alarming because you're like, what does she mean? But later on as we get into the case, you will see what she meant by that.
Yeah. That was really sad, that part for me, because I couldn't even imagine like being right here with my kidnapper, finna be murderer, and I'm forced to write out my last will and testament. Like, I can't imagine at 17 years old what thoughts were going through her head and what she was going through. But I think it speaks volumes that even when she knew she was facing certain death, that she had her family in mind, and it's just like, please go on, live your lives, good will come out of this. I think that just truly speaks to the type of person she was. And I feel like had she not been robbed of her youth, like, she probably would have went on to do great things, because I've heard nothing I read, well, when I was doing my research, I read nothing but positive things about her.
Absolutely. Her entire family. They were church going people, very active in the community, well known family, very respected family. So, we don't know what may happen to us from minute to minute, hour to hour, but you being that young, I remember being 17 and thinking that I had my whole life ahead of me,
Uh, don't
looking
we
forward to
all?
it. Yeah.
Don't
But,
we all? Like,
and then yeah,
go ahead, boo.
yeah, but just thinking like, like this is really it. This is my last, like I got to get this all out to my family.
Yeah. And so after the letter, Larry Bell taunted this family for the next 6 days. When I say taunted, he called them repeatedly, claiming that Shari was still alive, and he would just say strange things. But the main thing is he had them believing that she was still alive when forensics actually determined that she more than likely passed away shortly after writing that letter.
Like
And
12
that was,
hours.
yeah, like 12 hours of her being kidnapped, she was probably already deceased. And he carried this on for 6 days, calling this family, taunting this family, which each time he called, he primarily would speak with Shari's older sister, Dawn. And they even suspected that he intended to kidnap Dawn, not Shari, because he misspoke in one of the phone calls and made the statement, I just had to make love to Dawn. You didn't have Dawn, you had Shari. So that led detectives to think like, did he kidnap the wrong person? And it made me wonder, how do you know this family? Like, have you been watching them
Right.
to know these girls, and for you to make a comment like, I wish I just want to make love to Dawn. I don't think much came out about that as far as the reasoning or why he targeted them specifically. I didn't see much in my research on that. But just imagine your loved one is missing and someone is calling you every day for 6 days, taunting you, not giving you any information on the whereabouts, just claiming that this person is still alive. And then randomly on day 6, you call and give the family directions to where they could find Shari's body, which was 18 miles west of Shari's home. And she was found behind an old Masonic lodge in Saluda County. And like I said, she had been deceased for some days.
And I can't imagine, right, how the family struggled, because imagine having to stay calm with your daughter's potential killer, and trying
Right,
to stay calm to get the information you need, because back then it took 15 minutes to trace a call.
right,
And having to stay calm to get the information and hope you stay on the phone long enough so that the police can get what they need to get closer to solving where your daughter is and if she's alive or not, you
right.
know? And that part, because the whole time it really felt like he was on a power trip with women,
Yeah.
because every time he called, he only wanted to speak to the mom and her sister,
Hmm.
no one else.
Yeah, and I read where they said he had a God complex.
Yes.
So that plays into that.
Like for 5 days, he taunted this family, reassuring them that she was okay. She was okay. She was eating. She was drinking water. She was fine. And the last call, he gave the location of where she was, and the family begged. They said, please let us go, with the police, let us go with y'all. And they assured them, they said, no, please stay home, let us go. So they went. They
Mhm.
discovered her body, and they were determined based off the decomposition of the body that she was actually had been out there. I mean, she probably passed 12 hours after she wrote the letter, but she had been out there a substantial amount of time. And keep in mind, it's summertime.
Yes.
So he purposely placed her out there so to speed up the decomposition process so that there wouldn't be any evidence left on her.
Yeah, because they did say he was smart now. Like, I mean, even though he had a trade as an electrician, they say he was very smart. Like, he knew to distort his voice. Like Shot said, he knew to place her out in the middle of the sun in May in South Carolina. If you're not from South Carolina, then you don't know. But like, it's hell hot in May, June, July, and August as well. It doesn't even chill off a little now until like what you would say October, November.
Yes.
That's global warming, but that's a whole conversation for another time. But yeah, South Carolina is hot, hot. So he was smart, but he wasn't that smart because obviously he got caught.
Obviously. So, of course, they found her body. They have a funeral. And this disgusting monster continued to call this family even up until the night of her funeral. So he continued to call. And imagine being her mother, having to sit on the phone and listen to this maniac wanting to speak to you, you having to stay calm so that the police can trace the call. And this man wants to discuss with you how he killed your daughter.
Right. And I even read somewhere that the majority of the time he distorted his voice, but there was like maybe a handful of times where he didn't. So it's like you, at this point, you're not even caring. You getting a little sloppy because shortly after that, on June the 14th, which is about 2 weeks after Shari was kidnapped, he kidnapped a 9-year old, Deborah May Helmick, from her front yard. She was literally the front yard. Her daddy was there, and he goes outside, and she's gone. And this was about 24 miles away from where Shari was kidnapped at her home. So he really just going around just snatching up little girls. And I don't know if it's any significance that they were both blonde. I'm not going to say that. I didn't see any indication anywhere there in the research, but some kidnappers, some murderers, they have like a type for whatever reason. But he kidnapped Deborah. There wasn't much as far as Deborah's history because she's a baby. She's only 9 years old, so she hasn't gotten a chance to live her life, so there wasn't a lot on her. I didn't find a lot on the family, but I do know that once he killed Deborah, he called the Smith family yet again after midnight on June the 23rd to tell them where he had left Deborah's body, which is just off a dirt road. And I know I said previously he would say really weird things, weird cryptic things to them. And he told them, Deborah May is waiting. God forgive us all.
Just always on a power trip.
Like how unhinged.
Sick person. And then once again, I hate to keep repeating this, but you have to understand the magnitude of Shari's mother, because that's all he wanted to speak to, and sister having to stay on the phone with this maniac, providing all these details. And the family, even though they're in their grief and very upset, they're trying to help solve Deborah's murder as well. And they're staying on the phone with him to possibly get a lead to see if their two deaths are related. Because at that time, police really felt like, okay, we got like these cases are definitely linked together.
Right.
And it possibly he committed because obviously he admitted to it. So
Right.
they're also trying to stay on the phone with him long enough, because at that point he didn't even want to, when he murdered Deborah, he didn't even want to talk about Shari anymore.
No.
He just wanted to talk about Deborah. He was
And I'm
done.
like, why do you call a whole other family to talk about your new murder victim? Why not call? I wonder why he didn't call her parents.
Right. Like, why are you taunting this family continuously?
About yet, like they just buried their daughter, and now you're calling them about killing a 9-year-old. Like, I can't imagine the trauma, because even me just researching this case and looking at like it's on if you guys want to see it, it is on an episode of Forensic Files. But just watching, the mom and Shari's mom and dad, like I don't know how they were able to do that. Her parents were Bob and Hilda Smith. I don't know how they were able to do that because there's no way that I could go through with something like that. Like as soon as I found my daughter's body, I probably would have never answered the phone again. But thank God they did because this poor 9 year old did not deserve that. And
No,
Sherry didn't
no.
either though, but 9 years old?
Yeah, yeah.
Nine.
And they definitely so like so of course they ended up finding Deborah's body, and immediately they worked even harder. They was like, we have to get this person before he does this again. So
Yeah.
they pulled in an FBI profiler, and I'm gonna tell you, every case that I like watch on Forensic Files or whatever, I always love when they pull in an FBI profiler, because I'm wondering, like, how on point are they gonna be with this
Yeah.
person? And they're always on point.
Yeah. And
Always.
it's crazy. It's crazy how they come to the conclusion of what the suspect may be, or what they may look like, or their personality type. But it's usually, now this is coming from me watching several episodes of Law and Order SVU. So you you take this with a grain of salt, but they be on point because I'll be like, now how did you know that?
Right.
Like I can see myself being an FBI profiler because I love true crime and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, he was his what was his name? Douglas something. Douglas, was it John Douglas?
I can't remember his name, but shout out to Mr. Douglas if that's his name,
I
because
know the last name was Douglas, but the first name I'm spacing. I think it was John. Don't quote me on that, but I know the last name was Douglas.
yes, like he was on point. So they pulled him in to, because like we mentioned before, the Larry at the time, at that point they didn't know it was Larry, but the suspect who was calling was using a voice distortion device to disguise his voice, and they just didn't have any leads. So they felt like a FBI profiler come in and kind of build this person and kind of
Hmm.
um shape like the personality and the history of this person. It would be useful to kind of narrow the search, which they do in often in cases, right?
Right.
So basically they determined that this man would be unmarried or in a troubled marriage, had a long history of aggravated assault and sexual abuse.
Hmm.
um, they also determined that at that point in time, at that moment, he would probably be like disheveled, not shaving, and wanting to talk about the case really bad.
And I think they said something about he would be overweight too.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So a break came in, a very, very unsuspecting break came in, because I'm telling you, I don't know what kind of eyes these people have, because this would have missed me
Me too.
altogether.
Cause I got four eyes and I still can't see. So you know,
But thank God for these people, because
right.
I had it been me, my eyes would have missed it. But they went back to the letter, because the letter was the focal point of the whole case at that point, right?
Hmm.
So they went to the letter and saw that they saw the words, but then they noticed there was some indentation from more writing, as if someone had uh, wrote over a piece of paper, and
Hmm.
some of whatever writing was on the bottom sheet of paper had transcribed on Sherry's letter.
Right.
So they did some type of testing, some type of process where they could dust. Kind of, I mean, looking at it, kind of resemble like if somebody was dusting for fingerprints. So they were able
Yeah.
to make out some of the letter, like, well, some of the words that had transcribed onto Sherry's letter by mistake. And it was a grocery list. It said groceries, utilities, and then there was a phone number.
Hmm.
So by the grace of God, like the phone number was actually very legible, like you could see it. So detectives called the number, and it happened to be a number of a family. And they were telling them about the case and stuff. So immediately, this family was called. I can't remember their first names, but the couple, their last name was Shepherd.
The guy's name was Ellis.
Yes.
Yeah. Ellis
So
Shepherd.
So I don't think they mentioned the wife's name.
No, they didn't. And the family member happened to be Ellis's son that they call, and he was living in Huntsville, Alabama.
So they're around there during that time, like on a vacation. I think they had been gone for like 6 weeks to
Hmm.
Alabama. So the detectives called them and said, "Hey, we need your help." They immediately flew back to South Carolina, and they listened to the tapes, and he was like, "Oh my God!" They almost knocked him off his feet. He said, "Oh my God, that's Larry." So boom, we have a
Yeah.
person at that
Because,
point.
like I said before, he didn't always distort his voice. There were a couple tapes where his voice was not distorted, and they let Mr. Shepard listen to the ones that his voice was not distorted.
Yes. So apparently Larry was housekeeping for the Shepherds while they were gone to Alabama. So the paper that had transcribed, well, the paper and the writing that had transcribed onto Sherry's letter was actually a list that the Shepherds left, well, a list of numbers and like a grocery list for Larry to have while he was house sitting
Hmm.
for the Shepherds. Now imagine you think you've trusted this man with your home,
Girl,
and you come back and there's a whole murder investigation.
when I tell you that sit me,
Yes,
because I can't imagine trusting somebody, and he's so bold as to make some of the calls where he was taunting this family. He made some of them from their home.
their home
Like,
phone.
you
Yeah.
got, if men ain't got nothing else, they got audacity. You know what you got
Right.
some nerve to call and taunt this family whose daughter you have murdered from my house.
Yes.
Now you got me dragged into some mess when I hired you to do some work in the house sit for me. Like, be so for real.
Right. Right. So like we were discussing, like the family, well, the Shepherds flew back to Alabama immediately. So the Shepherds like provide police with the, now remember the description I had of Larry, well, that the FBI profiler that had created based off what they thought the murderer would look like.
Hmm.
So the Shepherds reported that Larry showed up disgruntled, he had gained some weight, and he hadn't shaved in whenever, like God knows when.
I can just imagine him looking a funky mess.
A
Like,
funky mess.
I know
And
it's like, go
and
ahead.
also he all he wanted to do was talk about Sherry and the case.
Yes. And Deborah too. He was talking about the cases of the missing girls, and that's all he wanted to talk about. And I'm like, that would have been an immediate red flag for me.
Right. Immediately. So I'm just grateful that the Shepherds work with police, because they could have been like, we don't know anything about it. Like they could have not, but they were very helpful. So immediately they got back to South Carolina. Larry drove them home and went wherever, I don't know. But they did allow police to come in and do a search of the home, and boom, they found the letter that had transcribed onto Sherry's letter.
Now, the hair was found at Bell's apartment. So
Really?
yeah, the hairs were found at Bell's apartment, and because y'all have to keep in mind this is before the age of them being able to run your DNA and stuff like that. So they were able to say that the hairs were microscopically similar to Sherry Smith's hair. And I also want to throw in that they could also not determine an exact cause of death for either Sherry or Deborah, because again, this is before the age of, them testing DNA. But they do know, they suggested that they both may have died by suffocation due to the residue of the duct tape that had been wrapped around both of their faces.
Like, so I really want to know why they didn't, and I'm gonna go back and look, because I really want to know why, I guess due to her age,
Hmm.
why they didn't really like interview Deborah's family like that. Like,
And I think it may have been because Sherry's case was already so publicized, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that's any excuse, because we literally, you see nothing about, Deborah's family. There's no information on her upbringing, childhood, none of that. And again, like I stated before, I think that may be due to her age. But Sherry's case was so publicized, and it also could be because he targeted this family and he continued to call them and taunt them, even on Deborah's case. So it's really weird, but I'm curious as to know that as well.
So so fast forwarding, I mean, at that point, police have identified Larry as the suspect and they arrest him. So Larry was arrested and he was charged with first degree murder and kidnapping.
Mhm.
So it only took the jury 47 minutes to make a
Mhm.
decision, and he was found guilty,
Yeah.
and he was sentenced to death. All right. So then a separate trial occurred for Deborah, and the same result: first degree murder, found guilty of first degree murder, and sentenced to death. So Larry became the second to last person to die from execution. Um,
In South Carolina.
he chose the electric chair,
And let
which
me just ask you real
mhm,
quick, sis. In your research, did you see where they said his testimony? It's not funny, y'all, but I can just see this man. Did you see where it said his testimony lasted for 6 hours? He was avoiding questions. Like the man put on a show, and they think he was trying to convince the jury that he was insane because he was saying crazy stuff. Like again, like we said, he had a God complex, claims he's Jesus Christ, and he was saying stuff like Mona Lisa is a man and silence is golden, my friend. Just off the wall.
yes, like I definitely saw that, and as a family member, I would have been livid, and they would have had to stop me from chugging my shoe at
Again,
him.
it's not funny, y'all, but come on
Yeah.
now.
Like he was just playing games, and people were alleging like, was he really crazy or he was just playing crazy?
Yeah,
Just to
yeah,
compete, just to like he had this continuous power trip, like to always keep like even down to choosing the execution. Like they was like, that's a
yeah.
really not
Like,
many
who
people
would choose
choose that,
electrocution?
right? But
You
they
know what I
said just to
mean?
do it for the optics, like
And
like
it's all
yeah,
about control with him. That's
yeah,
that's just it. And also, y'all, we want to make notes that he was suspected in a few other kidnappings and presumed murders that all occurred in North Carolina, primarily Charlotte, North Carolina. That's why we felt it was important to note how much he moved around. He never admitted to any of these kidnappings. Like I said, these people are still assumed missing till this day. But there were two specifically that they were looking at him for. I know one lady's name was Cornette, and I can't remember the other lady's name right off the top, but oh, I have it, Sandy Elaine Cornette, as well as Denise Porch. But there are several others that they felt he was a suspect in, but he never admitted to anything and they couldn't tie him to anything. So this man has been a menace.
yes. Like even so like we bring it up to 1996 when Larry was executed. So he was executed on October 4th of 1996. Like I mentioned, he was
Hmm.
the second to the last person in South Carolina to die by electrocution. All
Hmm.
right. Now Sherry's family, of course they come to court and everything, and Sherry, and I hate to keep bringing up the letter, but she listed in her letter, she said, good will come out of this. She said she didn't want them to focus too much on, she said she knew that they would be very distraught by this, but she said good will come out of it. And it actually did.
Hmm.
Dawn went on to be very successful, and she actually won Miss South Carolina in 1996.
Yes.
Yay for Miss
And she
Dawn.
did that in honor of Sherry because I think that was one of Sherry's lifelong dreams. But yeah, y'all, Larry Jean Bell, he's so dramatic to the point that he didn't even have any final or parting words at his electrocution.
But one thing that I wanted to mention before we close out, we can, of course. I think based off our whole episode, you know how crazy he was. But one thing I want to note, because it's very important, that it was noted possibly that he had like a personality disorder, like a dissociative personality disorder. Because when
Yeah,
they were asking him, like, "Did you do it?" He said, "The bad Larry did it. This Larry
not
didn't
the
do it.
not the good Larry.
Not the good Larry." And I was just
I'm
like,
like, you both
"Sir,
of them. Like, what you
yeah,
talking about?
yeah." But he spoke of himself as if he was like two people.
But I wonder how long ago did multiple, because they used to call it multiple personality disorder, and now it's called dissociative disorder.
Yeah.
I wonder how long ago did they actually start those diagnoses? Because this was in the 80s.
Yes.
And I'm trying to do a quick Google search. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get it before we close out, but yeah, it doesn't even say. But he had to have something. He was clearly not right in the mind.
No, absolutely not. And I'm grateful, from my understanding, Dawn is still doing very well living in Columbia. She is an inspirational speaker and a singer in Columbia, South Carolina. So I'm not sure about her parents if they're still with us, but um, shout out to that family for even in the in the midst of them really suffering and going through what they went through with their own daughters, still finding the courage to help someone else, help another family get their daughter's case off. So please leave your thoughts with us under our video or send through email. If you have any cases that you want us to cover, please send them to us. And yes, Toya, anything else?
That's it. Catch us back same time next week, and thank you so much for listening.
Absolutely. Take care of y'all. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.